Our next speaker is going to be Julie Robinson. And Julie is the Manager of Science, Technology, and Utilization Office within the NASA HEO System Integration Organization. And she's going to talk to us about the Artemis and HEO. So please feel free to share your screen.
So I'm really pleased to give you a little bit of an overview and really to tell you about how HEO is connecting to everything that Sarah talked to you about. And in terms of the way that we're coordinating our two mission directorates to work together on Artemis human missions. And so, just a quick recap of where we're headed for our early missions. We've got LRO data coming in, helping us plan those human missions. Artemis 1 will be the first spacecraft to the lunar vicinity in the 21st century. Artemis 2 will be the first crewed mission to orbit in the 21st century with a rendezvous in deep space. Then we'll start having the gateway elements going into orbit with the launch of the power and propulsion element and the HALO, the habitation and logistics outpost. And then you'll start seeing our early deep space missions coming in, Artemis 3 through 5 being crewed missions with cislunar buildup and the initial crew demonstration. On the surface of the moon, you see those early South Pole robotic landings, Viper coming in and giving us really incredible data for helping with our plans, the uncrewed HLS demonstration mission, and then the first crewed landing. Over the longer term, we'll shift, as you heard Sarah say, from a set of sortie missions as we start being able to construct and build infrastructure to a base camp mode. And that is really a 3-mission directorate cooperative effort with long-term surface access that's enabled by gateway and enabled by an infrastructure on the surface to allow extended duration studies and uncrewed activities. So the idea is not that we explore the moon only when the crew's there, but that we have a sustained and extensive exploration program on the surface of the moon. So what we're doing in HEO to set up that possibility is, first of all, we needed to construct an organization to interface with SEO, with SMD, as we put all of these plans together, because we need really close coordination between the architecture and the science objectives. And so about a year and a half ago, I was asked to stand up an office. We call it Science and Technology Utilization. And our objective is not to do the science and technology utilization, but to integrate the science and technology goals from the other mission directorates, from SMD and STMD, and our international partners, and develop that into a set of HEO utilization goals, objectives, and requirements for Artemis missions so that we can successfully conduct these human missions. We're also responsible for the cross-platform research strategy to prepare for human missions to Mars, meaning how we're using ISS, how we'll use commercial LEO, how we'll use Artemis in a way that is gradually advancing our overall human exploration capability. And what that office looks like, it's a very small group, and we are literally speaking with Sarah probably every day. It's myself as the acting manager. Jake Bleacher, who I know you all know well, continues as our chief exploration scientist. We have an STMD integration lead. Dion Hernandez-Lugo is just stepping into that position for a rotation. Betty Siegel, some of you know, and Mike Wade is our human systems integrator. We also have a multi-center support team that's helping do the early analyses that we need to do that understand the moon and understand curation and all of those different things so that we can be sure we're providing the right requirements input into the engineering requirements. As part of our multi-directorate responsibility, we also now have the responsibility for the HEO contributions and interactions on survey. So Greg and Christina and our office are working together very closely. And we also have the coordination with the Office of Planetary Protection, which we also do jointly with our SMD and STMD colleagues. One of the most important things we've done over the last 6 months is set up a working group that can help us bring the really large engineering organization that it takes in HEO to prepare to do these missions and to build the kind of hardware that we're talking about, and bring those programs together with our science and utilization colleagues, both in SMD, STMD, and even in HEO-MD, where we have things like the Human Research Program. So we set that up in something we call the USIG, the Utilization Coordination and Integration Group. And HEO's using a systems engineering enterprise level strategy. So our office is working at the mission directorate level, not at the division level. And so we have all of those implementing divisions involved so that we can really put together the best possible plans. Now, what we do is we take the science inputs that come from SMD, we take the technology inputs that come from STMD, and we integrate those together into a set of requirements that HEO believes it can meet. And so this is just a reminder that, this is the chart that SMD has shown in the past. Just a reminder that we don't write new science objectives. You shouldn't be looking for calls from HEO-MD. Those calls are going to come from SMD. And then they'll be passed to us and they'll trace to the community document. So we're doing a lot of work with the Artemis 3 SDT report, for example, and figuring out which of those components need to belong in which HEO documents and requirements along the way. Another thing that we're doing is working to define the long-term capabilities that are needed across the lunar architecture, especially as we head towards that base camp. And I wanted to give you a little insight into some of those things that we're working on together with our SMD colleagues. So model traverse approaches, the end-to-end sampling strategy, the integrated planetary protection strategy, not to protect the moon, but to make sure we're doing the forward work we would need for future human missions to Mars and using Artemis as a test bed for that. Extended missions also as test beds for Mars. So rather than just doing short missions on the moon forever, actually planning to do missions that have durations and modalities that look a lot like that first crewed mission to Mars. That's an important utilization need for Artemis at the longer term, not in the near term. Integrated crew research approaches, robotic utilization of HEO assets, the integrated instrumentation strategy, and PSR operations. Those were sort of our top 8 list of the most urgent integrated capabilities that we needed to define. And just to sort of give you just a quick window into those, as we work on model traverse approaches, we're looking at all the different elements that may be in the architecture and how do we define the right requirements for those, from suits to the LTV to future pressurized rovers. What are the requirements we need so those can work together and provide the best possible access to the places that scientists are interested in going. And of course, we use the community documents and we work with our SMD colleagues on defining those places and then figuring out how those would work in the missions and the capabilities over the long term. Similarly, Sarah mentioned the carry team providing inputs to us. What we need to do on the HEO side is figure out something incredibly challenging, which is how to take a sample that's frozen and from a PSR and get it back home. And that requires leveraging across multiple programs, multiple locations. That's a pretty complex integration activity that HEO has to do. And so we're working together on those concept of operations, on those requirements, and then on what would need to be built in order to enable that. That's something that's very challenging that we're working on very hard because we know how important being able to actually see those volatiles with laboratory facilities on Earth intact as close to as possible to the way that they were on the moon, how important of a scientific contribution that would be. And we're looking in great detail at the robotic science use cases for HEO assets. So the vision in HEO is that not only is the pressurized rover transportation for the week when the crew is on the surface in these early missions, but that also we would be able to use these assets during the rest of the year, at least during the seasons when there's good light available to keep things charged up. And so things that you've heard about, like the robotic arm studies that are going on, are and the LSSW workshop that we're talking about having, are to help us define these kinds of requirements so that LTV, when we go out and get ready to start having that designed and procured and competed, that it will have the right interface points so that a future science arm could be attached to that and do something outstanding. So just to kind of summarize what I talked about quite briefly, we're really standing up from scratch a great way to work together for many decades of lunar exploration and sustained lunar activities. So the first thing we had to do was kind of set up these HEO-MD, SMD coordination processes. We're just standing up a number of those, and they include things like the USIG I talked about, even the Federated Board, which has the DAAs from the 3 mission directorates meeting every week to be sure that they're in sync on the different things that are happening in the strategy and the architecture. Then the next thing we're working on is this HEO 006 utilization plan with our strategic utilization goals and objectives and the utilization capabilities. We're trying to get that baseline by the end of September. So we've been working very hard to get the first draft of that out and reviewed by the HEO community and the SMD community as an interpreter of the different community documents that they're working from. We're also starting international utilization discussions. In the same way, HEO will not be leading the science discussions. The disciplines and the experts that you work with all along will be leading those science discussions, but HEO will be coordinating them with the contributions to the human spaceflight architecture that you also hear our partners talking about, so that we're sure that we have utilization and the development of the system and the architecture and the crewed missions all synchronized together between our agencies. We have a draft out now of the utilization requirements for the first crewed landing based on the Artemis 3 SDT and on SMD's need to select the science in the future. So they will be selecting that final science, but we framed out the overall capabilities that they'll be able to use. And we're making sure that all 3 mission directorates agree on the overall strategic plan for utilization that we're putting in place. Then our forward work into next year is to make sure we've got good phasing of all these utilization capabilities and that we've got an overall agreement on that plan that can be flexible as, of course, missions will change, timelines will change, and so that we can really move toward a sustained planning and collaboration approach for utilization of the moon. So I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you,
Thank
Julie.
you.
Go ahead, Claudia. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. That was excellent. We have now time for some questions if you want to raise your hand or write some in the chat.
Oh,
there's
yep.
Clive.
Clive's got his hand up.
Yeah, hi, Julie. I came in late and I apologize for that, but that's a story of my life these days. Just a quick, you last couple of slides there, the term sustained came up. Can you give me your definition of sustained? Because I think my definition and yours may be different. And
yeah,
it leads to different expectations.
There are a lot of definitions of sustained out there. And I'm not going to say my personal definition is the official definition. I think the agency has been having conversations and has not settled on a definition of that. But in principle, for me as a scientist and as someone who's trying to enable science, the goal is to make sure that all of the utilization architecture and the human architecture contribute to the scientific exploration goals, and that it's not a one-off. It's not a mission here, a mission there, uncoordinated, but there's actually a long-term strategy. There's a buildup of capability, and that we keep providing access to new sites and are able to respond to discoveries and then do a full exploration over a period of decades. So
Excellent.
That's my personal definition.
Excellent. I hope that's the official one too. So I really like that one. So.
I'll try.
No pressure. Thank you.